Welcome to Comparing Residential Green Certifications Part 1. This course is approved for 1 hour in continuing education units, as well as AIA, HSW. I'm your presenter today. My name is Brett Little, and I'm the Executive Director here at the Green Home Institute. The Green Home Institute is a nonprofit with a mission to empower people to make healthier and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. This course is going to go over the introduction to all of the green rating systems. We're going to get a basic just review of each of these major green rating systems. And then in the next sessions, we are going to go much more in depth into a four-part series. So we'll be talking prerequisites during the next session. And then we'll be talking about the energy program baselines. So a lot of these green programs actually, you have to start at the basics, which is the energy programs. So we're going to be going in detail about these different energy programs and how they compare. And then we're going to get into the other areas of green: health, materials, place, and water, and see how those compare and contrast against those different rating systems. And then pre-course knowledge. This is not really a session to help you necessarily understand building science, more of just how it compares and how different rating systems compare it. So if you are looking for robust courses on that, you can take the basics of residential green rebuilding. You can go to our website and take the Green Home Associates course, which gives you a lot of knowledge and background into the green building science education and movement. And there's all sorts of resources out there too to help you with that. Green building certifications are really about building better than barely legal, we like to say, or building beyond code. And so each green building rating system kind of follows this degree of green, and depending on whether you find yourself a market leader or a risk taker or an innovator, one of these different programs may make more sense. Some of them are more basic, a little bit more focused on just going a little bit above code, and then others, are going way beyond that into more restorative and sustainable design features. So the question, that we like to ask, and that you need to be asking yourselves, is where are you, and where do you want to be? And which of these green building programs is a useful tool for you to accomplish your job? Whether you certify or not, we believe these green building programs are great resources, great tools, great education, great checklists to help you manage a green building certification project and be able to communicate it to your client and help you understand, you figure out what your client's needs are, and then, most likely their needs are going to fit into one of these rating systems or not. And of course, you know that you want to be designing a better product, but it's difficult to communicate that. And you also know you're going to get your clients better valued buildings. So green homes, are going to have more value, and we're going to start to see in the future homes that are not green continue to lose that value. Right now, we're in a unique situation here in 2017, late 2017, where the market is up, but as things start to slow down eventually, those kinds of value differences between green and non-green will start to become more apparent. So you can see one of the most recent studies out of Texas, $25,000 resale value added to certified LEED buildings or residential homes. That's an 8% jump, and that same study shows that even if it's not LEED certified, if it's green certified, it's got a 6% jump. You can see studies on 9% premiums on property values for green certified multifamily housing. You can see just overall tenants being attracted to LEED certified buildings, to green certified buildings, because of the environmental aspect, the health aspect, and all those other things. That it really communicates that kind of value. And again, there's just been study after study, mostly on the Pacific Northwest, East Coast, Atlanta. We're still waiting for the Midwest and mid-America, but just increased value all across the board. And part of that has to do with the spreading of the green multiple listing services. So this allows, when you're selling a house, to list green features, green certifications, so that definitely helps. And then you've also got the commercial for multifamily and the residential green residential green and energy efficiency addendum. So your appraisers who you're working with, you can make sure that you only hire an appraiser who understands green and will hopefully have this credential and use this form to properly value your building. And that's what these green rating systems are basically here for, is that there's a lot of greenwashing going on. There's a lot of zero washing going on now. And so, it's kind of like the word quality. It's become overblown. It really has no meaning. So how do you verify and prove, your product, your design, your construction process, really is green? And so it really is that independent verification with quality assurance, with auditable results, with metrics and performance metrics is what we're looking at here. And then being able to have a way to celebrate your certification, to market it, and really to show off your accomplishment, as a high-performance home builder or designer. So what we're going to cover here at this beginning is the background of each organization, how much recognition, incentives, what the costs are, what kind of third-party oversight, what kind of education is involved, mandatory requirements, what kind of values are there when selecting a green rating system, and then what kind of level there is of that green rating system. And really help you answer that question, where you find yourself on the green continuum right now with just what you're doing already, because you're probably doing a lot of great work. And then, how do you continue to progress along that green continuum from above code to sustainable to restorative housing. So let's take a quick look. You've got the DOE Zero Energy Ready program. You've got Green Globes. You've got Green Star. You've got the Home Innovations Lab's National Green Building Standard program. You've got Enterprise Green Communities, Lead for Homes. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Lead for Buildings Operations and Maintenance. Believe it or not, all multifamily existing projects that aren't doing major renovations that are 20 units or above can actually go through the LEED EBOM program now, which is a little bit more digestible for LEED for existing buildings that aren't planning major renovations or got rehabs. Before, multifamily really couldn't participate in this, and now they can. Passivhaus US, and then the top tier, which is the Living Building Challenge. So again, just taking a look sort of at that sustainability continuum and seeing, depending on what green rating system you're using, what level of that rating system you want to achieve, and where you're at, and where your clients want you to be for the project that they're hiring you for, is what we really hope to help you out with. And we're going to be using the 5 pillars of green. So each of these rating systems have their own sort of green credit categories. So what we've done is we've sort of merged them all into these 5. So throughout these 4 sessions, you'll know that we're going to go over energy, health, water, materials, and place. They all have different names in different rating systems, but each of the rating systems all have a focus on these top 5, what we call pillars of green. So let's start with the Department of Energy Zero Energy Ready Home program. This is a program, again, that is designed, developed by the U.S. Department of Energy and is managed through their Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Department. So this, unlike the HERS Index rating and unlike Energy Star, which are a basis to this program, which you'll learn a little bit more in the next session, this program is directly developed and overseen by the Department of Energy and not the EPA. And so, yeah, there have been discussions on its future existence, and certainly there have been some thoughts there. And for what we can tell from the most part in our conversations with the Department of Energy, this program is rolling forward very rapidly and does not seem to have any sign that it will slow down. As you can see here, the growth of the program from 2013 to 2017, both in number of homes or units certified, up to nearly 2,000 by now, I believe, and then the number of partners. So you can become a building partner builder partner within this program. And here is some of the states where it's been mostly active. So as we can expect, some of these areas where green building is not so prominent in Middle America, and just before you get to the Pacific Northwest is where some homes, there still haven't been any certified homes. This program is eligible mostly for any type of building except for it's not really set up for mixed-use space or high-rise buildings. Part of that has to do with REM rate and your HERS index provider. So if your HERS provider, which we've been hearing more of, allow you to go above 5 stories, it's usually the cutoff, then you may be able to run a DOE program through a larger building. Multifamily mid-rise, again, might be a little bit difficult just if you've got central HVAC systems. And then this program inherently is not really set up for additions, remodels, or weatherizations. It's really going to require a deep gut rehab and a reorientation or a proper orientation of the roof for solar access, which we'll get into those details later. This program is pass-fail, no credits, all prerequisites. So it's either you're in or you're out. It's black and white. So all mandatory prerequisites. For the costs and verification, this program is delivered through the HERS Index and the Energy Star Rater. So in the same manner that if you're familiar with HERS Index ratings, and don't worry, we're going to get into those in the next session, or Energy Star ratings, this program is done through that same pathway, to that same rater. They're just trained to do that. Ideally, the rater is a third party, but they can be second party or on staff with the design or build firm as long as a conflict of interest form is signed. We see that raters charge anywhere between $500 to $1,500 per unit, but that's very dependent on your market and what kind of pricing there is and what kind of house values there are. And so that's for the HERS and Energy Star, and then we suspect that for them to do the kind of work they need to do to deliver zero energy, that could be anywhere to double that cost for the extra amount of paperwork that needs to be done. DOE does not charge you any registration or certification fees. The HERS provider audits 5% of the HERS rated homes, and that's during pre-drywall and final. So that auditor's coming out to audit your auditor to make sure their work is done right. And what you're going to be submitting are the Energy Star reports, the builder checklist, the HVAC checklist, the solar ready checklist, and an indoor air plus checklist. So a lot of that is done by, some of that's done by the design, but most of that's done by the field, the builders in the field who are just signing off that they've completed each of these components of the home. Same, the HVAC is going to be doing some preliminary design on the startup, and then they're going to be signing off that they've been doing all of the testing and inspection required to meet that. All right, and then we've got the Green Star program. This program is actually administered by us, the Green Home Institute. And this program is actually available to any building type. There are differences on what you need to do, but it is completely open and available. There are about 59 requirements or mandatory prerequisites, and those are going to vary slightly on if you're doing a remodel or an addition or new construction, single family, or if you're doing multifamily. This is just a quick snapshot. We have a completely free open source online checklist that you can access, that you can use anytime that you want to help make better decisions. And this is a tool that is designed to kind of take you through each of the sections of a home or building and help you make them greener based on information. And the manual, the Green Star manual, is built right into the checklist, so it's all there. There's not somewhere else that you have to look for that. There's 2 pathways for verification. There's the ideal pathway, we like to say, is hire a third party, I should say, third-party Green Star rater. So it's $250 per submitted checklist. So you can do a whole neighborhood, a whole community, a whole building all on one checklist, or you can separate it based on what your goals are. 15% documentation audit on the Green Star rater, one project a year re-inspection. And then the raters are folks that we don't control. They're all in the market. And so, these are some of the fees that we see them charging per unit. And again, if you've got volume, pricing, and stuff, those numbers can go down. And then depending on what kind of testing and energy modeling and inspections you're asking them to do, those prices could shift from higher or lower as well. If you're someone who wants to do self-submission, or you're out in a rural area where you don't have access to a rater, you can do a self-submission pathway. It's $1,000 per checklist submitted, 100% documentation review online. It may require a visual or sort of a virtual inspection that can be done through a GoPro or the phone, and it does not require the Green Star rater. And then the documentation is going to be pretty straightforward, like every green rating system. It'll depend on the credit. There'll be rater sign-offs that might be able to take up most of the documentation: receipts, photos, drawings, plans, elevations, energy, water model reporting, specifications, and calculations. Green Globes. This is a pretty new to the scene certification program that just came out. In 2014, in 2004, GBI saw the opportunity to adapt a Canadian web-based interactive learning tool developed by Bream to the needs of the U.S. commercial buildings. At the end of the year, GBI brought the Green Globes environmental assessment and rating tool into the market. In 2009, it became the first building rating organization to become Ansi developed. And it uses the Ansi process to create open, balanced, consensus-based certifications. And it uses the Green Building Assessment Protocol for commercial buildings out of the Green Globes environmental design and assessment rating for new construction. So they're a nonprofit institute. So Green Globes is administered by GBI, not to be confused with GBCI, or otherwise the Green Building Initiative. And so here's sort of a breakdown of the types of buildings that they certify, and you can see that they do have a healthy, in comparison to all of their projects, as of 2016, they have a healthy multifamily portfolio. So definitely a strong residential program to be sure. And someone asked the question, what is the Ansi process? So you can go online and Google Ansi, A-I-N-S-I. It's basically a way to have a consensus in your program. And so you're certifying your certification program, or you're certifying some kind of program to say, this program is open source, open to public comment, and it's not closed to members or people who pay us or industry lobbyists. It's an open-based system. And so, not many green rating systems are ANSI approved. In fact, that's one of the biggest complaints about LEED, is that it is not an ANSI approved rating system. So, yeah, great question. So anyway, you can see here, again, just these are the multifamily certifications, I think as mid-2016, number of buildings that have been certified. So again, you can kind of see the distribution follows our normal distribution, where you've got these states up here and sort of the mid-America that, just in general, we find as laggards in the green building world. Green Globes is more developed for commercial, so you'll really only find it available to multifamily programs. And so it's not really available for single-family projects at all, but definitely for all stages on the multifamily and high-rise and mixed use. So this is a new and an existing building program certification. Because it's so new and we don't know too much about it, we focused primarily on the new side of it, so we don't get too much into how existing works for the sake of this webinar, just to be open about that. But they do have two different pathways and two different lines of requirements. One of the things about Green Globes is it has 0 requirements, 0 prerequisites, 0 mandatory credits. So that's one thing to keep in mind. There are no prerequisites. And so you can see their distribution of where their points come from in each of these areas. And you can see, like most green rating systems, they have a high focus on energy and a secondary focus on indoor environmental quality and health. And then here's how their program works. So if you can collect at least 35% of the points, you can get 1 green globe, 55, 2 green globes, 70, 3 green globes, and if you can obtain at least 85% of all the available points in the rating system, you can get 4 green globes. And this is kind of just what what that kind of means to the market, or what it should mean to the market, depending on how many of those you're getting. Documentation, again, seems pretty straightforward with all other programs. And then there is a handout you'll get access to, which goes into more detail on what you need to document per credit. And here's some of their pricing. So on this column, this is new construction, and in this column, it's existing. And so you can see for existing, you just have final certification site visit fees. But for new construction, you actually have to do a design review, and you have to do a final. So you can see there's the combined fees here for the new construction side, and that's pretty much contingent on gross floor area. And this is actually not only their certification registration fees, but this is also the fees for the rater, for the assessor. The assessor is pre-assigned. So unlike other green building rating systems where you go out and hire the assessor, they're actually assigning you the assessor from their organization, who is subcontracted, and then they're paying the assessor. So you're not having to negotiate those kinds of fees or anything or deal with that. That's something that they'll handle, and then they're going to charge you a little bit for travel. So wherever the assessor is coming from, I suspect somewhere up around $2,000 for the travel fees on top of these fees to have the assessor come in and do that final on-site certification. And you'll be working with that assessor on the preliminary rating as well. And as I mentioned, again, part of what might be important to you is what kind of political affiliations these entities have. For whatever reason, that might be another part. So we're going to spend a second about that. Based on what our research has seen, we haven't seen any financial lobbying going on. But we do know that based on what we've heard, Green Globes and GBI have spent a significant amount of time, maybe not giving out contributions, but significant amount of time lobbying to keep USGBC and LEED outside of incentives and federal requirements. That's what we've heard through the grapevine. So if that's something you support or don't support, it's definitely worth knowing. All right, so the Home Innovations Lab, National Green Building Standard. This organization, from all intensive purposes, is a wholly owned and independent subsidiary of the National Association of Home Builders. So if you go to the Home Innovation websites, you'll probably not necessarily notice that they are a part of the HBA, the National Association of Home Builders, but clearly they have some sort of connection to them. They used to be called the NHAB Research Center, but that's who they're a part of. So if you don't know who the Association of Home Builders is, I'll let you go and do that research on your own. So the Home Innovation Lab, a really cool organization out of Maryland that does a lot of reports, that actually does in-house testing of products and actually certifies products for building science purposes. And they help train and credential verifiers, and then they help certify buildings. But they are, full-fledged service to effectively make homes better. And so again, they do have a green certification product program, which is fairly unique compared to other rating systems. And I think you can actually get extra points, or it makes it easier to obtain points or to go out and try to vet materials if you just use points that are already pre-certified through their program or products. NGBS can apply to any project type, any building height, any building size. So they're pretty much fair game for anything that you're working on. It is not a commercial rating system. residential only, but it can work with mixed use. NGBS only has 18 requirements, which is fairly small, obviously not zero, but fairly small compared to other green building rating systems. And here's sort of a breakdown of where they weight in the, the 5 pillars of green that we talked about. So you can see we have the number of points associated with each of these categories that you can collect, and then what percentage of points you can get each in those. And it's fairly well distributed across all of the 5 pillars. And so you can also see one of the differences with their program is that you have to collect a threshold of points in each of their chapters to move on. So you can't just put all your points into resource efficiency or energy efficiency and move to the silver, gold, or emerald level. You've got to get a baseline in each of these areas, and then you have to get some additional points as well to get a certification level. And just here's a quick snapshot. They have an Excel-driven workbook that you can go online and download for free. What they encourage you to do as the builder or project team is to get this workbook, get it filled out, and then hire a National Green Building Standard rater, and then get them on board. You may find that you want to just bring in the verifier first to help you through this, and I highly recommend it. There are a lot of things that can trip you up on this checklist. One thing you've really got to watch out for are these yellow tabs. If you see any empty yellow tabs, that should be an instant sign to you as you're going through this thing that you have missed something and you need to fill it out. So you can see here's a real project, where this doesn't appear to be a prerequisite, but we actually got tripped on it because you have to have you either have to have a building air infiltration of 5 or less. And if you do have that, then you have to implement one of these exhaust strategies. We didn't even read through that real quick. We just thought, oh, there's no prerequisite here. They're not doing any of this stuff. Why bother with it? But that came back to bite us during the review. So anyway, this is the tab, and you can see each of the different categories are tabbed out. And then what you do is you get the project workbook filled out. Hopefully, then you start your construction process, and then the National Green Building Standard verifier is going to come in and do a rough inspection, and then they're going to sign off that everything is there during rough, and then they submit it to the Home Innovations Lab, and then you pay the registration fee, and then you get approved to go into the final stage. Once the final is done, the verifier comes back, does the final inspection, and then signs off. And so this rough inspection stage is required, and your project will be disqualified if you try to submit only during the final. They do require the rough. So make sure you don't miss that if you want to use a program like this. You've got to be very proactive. Here are some of their fees. So you can check this fee chart online, $200 per home, $200 per whole building renovation. Volume discounts if you're doing massive neighborhoods. And then, of course, multifamily, you pay $200 per unit plus $200 per building plus $30 a unit. And then there's all of this volume pricing associated with it. Verification costs, there are no certification fees, only the registration fees due at rough. The NGBS Green Verifier, again, $500 to $2,000 per unit, and that's going to be contingent on where your market is, what the value is there, what you're asking them to do. The other thing to consider is this NGBS verifier a HERS index rater or an energy modeler? Because if they're not, you're also going to have to hire those folks and get another person involved. You can't do any sampling, so the green verifier actually has to inspect every single unit. So that's one thing to consider, is that a lot of green building programs will allow you to do sampling, which can shave off thousands of dollars on big projects. But NGBS does not allow any sampling except for the HERS rating. They do allow the HERS raters to follow the sampling protocol and only sample the amount of units that are involved. Documentation is basically going to be very subjective, highly subjective on who your NGBS green verifier is. They're going to be asking you for documentation before they sign anything if they're missing something during those field inspections. So obviously have that conversation with your verifier, whoever you hire. And then there is the idea that the green verifiers will have your project re-inspected from National Green Building Standard to Home Innovations Lab. It could be a certain percentage, though it does not seem to be a usual occurrence, or there's no pre-written percentage of what those re-inspections are. And again, we looked at open secrets, and very clearly, you can quite clearly see that the National Association of Home Builders gives quite a bit to both parties, but definitely more to Republicans. And a lot of NHAB have a lot of great, we'll say, involvement in energy code changes in every state. Though certainly they have, they certainly would be the first to attempt to stop energy codes from progressing too fast. Whether that's good or bad, I leave that up to you. That's just if you're going to be doing a home innovations project, this is the entity you're supporting. All right, 2015 Enterprise Green Communities criteria. So this is the Enterprise Green Communities certification program, which, much to its name, does not certify communities. It only certifies buildings, so it might be a little misleading there. The story of Enterprise really began back in 1982 when real estate developer and visionary entrepreneur Jim Rouse founded a new organization to seek out and partner with affordable housing and community development groups all over the country. He wanted to help them tap into resources, tackle challenges, and share their knowledge. In naming the organization, Jim and his wife, Enterprise co-founder Patty Rouse, thought of the spirit that had made our country great in the first place. And that's the spirit that had carried us through the Depression and the 2 world wars, and the same spirit that enabled him to lift himself and his family out of poverty. And that's really the spirit of Enterprise. So the Enterprise, they have a whole bunch of resources to give loans and funding and education and training to affordable housing developers, to states, city institutions, to really help ensure that affordable housing, that everybody has access to affordable housing, no matter where they're at in the country or what their needs are. So you can see here, as of, I think, as of early 2017, you can see what states are active. So the blue line is the number of buildings certified, and the green line is the number of units. One thing you'll see that's very clear is that New York has its own version of this program, and as you can see why that is. But yeah, heavily active in the Northeast for sure. Definitely really heavily active in the Northeast coast and Eastern Seaboard for this program. Well, a majority of all the states, at least 39 states plus the District of Columbia have certification. So it's definitely at this point countrywide, except your usual suspects. And this program applies to all building types, all shapes and sizes. And so, except for commercial, it's all residential and mixed use. I will say that it's only meant for affordable housing only. So if you're doing a market rate program, you're not supposed to certify. You're not supposed to use it. And its goal is to focus on 60% AMI rental or 80%. So if you don't know what area median income is, go and Google it. It basically means the percentage that a family makes within a particular area, and each area sets its own AMI based on all sorts of processes and development. So this program actually has some of the highest amount of requirements and prerequisites, 65, but that is slightly different depending on if you're new, substantial, or moderate. Obviously, the more you get into a moderate renovation, some of those mandatory requirements and prerequisites start to drop off. Enterprise, as far as the point distribution goes, has a huge focus on place, having a sense of place. and then a secondary focus on health as far as where you can collect points are. I would say compared to many of the rating system, it has a little bit of a lower focus on energy, though it has a high threshold, which you'll see in the further sessions that we do. Unlike other rating systems, it has no defined levels. It's basically just purely based on points. So you have a new construction projects must achieve at least all mandatory plus 35 points. Substantials must achieve all mandatory plus 30 points. And after that, it's all just points. So you don't say your NGB or your EGC green, platinum or gold. You would just say your EGC plus 50 points or whatever. So from a marketing standpoint, it doesn't really have that sort of that tiered level approach. Their workbook is free and open source online. I highly encourage you to check it out, especially if you're in the affordable housing realm. Gives a lot of great resources. Their manual is online. It's really well done. Really great resource. It's free. There's no other resources you have to find. And then a majority of the details are also within the workbook. As you are documenting things, you will see you're going to be sort of selecting what your strategy was, whether you deviated with it. And then you really got to focus on every single credit. They're asking, where the heck is this credit in your plans? What page in your specs, your scope of work, or somewhere else? You've got to go through every single credit in detail where it's at. And then for your own internal purposes, you can be assigning champions. And then you can see within the workbook, you can see all the details of what you need to do. And then what's really cool is that every project can submit a waiver. If you feel like you can't meet a requirement because of X, Y, Z, you can submit a waiver. And we've submitted a few and gave well-reasoned intentions and have been able to bypass some of the requirements if you can explain how, you know, that credit may not make the project affordable for affordable housing. So I really appreciate that being in there. They have a boatload of documentation. In fact, out of all the rating systems, I think that I'll talk about today, this one has a lot. So you'll be able, once you get through the online checklist, you'll kind of make sure you know what you're getting into, because this kind of reveals itself later on in the process. But you'll get in, and it will tell you all the things you need to upload, and then you just go through and upload it. And you have to do similar to National Green Building Standard, you have to do a preliminary plan review to get approved by the enterprise before a hammer can be swung. So you have to have a bunch of documentations and points submitted and approved by EGC before construction starts. Part of that's to make sure your construction is on track. But you could jeopardize your certification if you try to submit backwards and forget the pre-submittal portion. And again, here's just if you're pursuing certain points, they've made it really easy for you to upload the documentation for each of these. Registration and certification are absolutely 100% free. But don't let that fool you. The amount of documentation that goes and the amount of back and forth with this entity is a lot. And so you're going to be hiring, most likely, either you're going to be hiring someone or spending a lot of your own time, but you're going to want to get a green technical assistance provider or a consultant or an architect who knows what they're doing. And we find that to run anywhere between $5,000 to $30,000, maybe even more depending on the market. And then don't forget you've got to do the energy modeling. So that's either the HERS rating or ASHRAE. And again, there's some of those fees. There's the quality assurance on the HERS rater that needs to be done if you're using low-rise. And then to our knowledge, there's no known quality assurance done on ASHRAE energy models. And there's no known quality assurance done by Enterprise on your building. Though they have talked about it, we haven't seen anybody actually get re-inspected before in the past. So. Enterprise does do a lot of lobbying. And they tend to focus on taxes, federal budget, housing, a lot of transportation needs, urban development. They definitely do a lot of national and state-based lobbying to get a lot of these low-income housing and transportation needs met for some of the poorest folks in cities. Passivhaus Institute US. Passivhaus Institute. Passivhaus was actually started in the US during the energy crisis. And then when the energy crisis went away, we kind of abandoned energy efficiency as a country for the most part. And so the Germans picked up on it. And then, so if you know anything about Passivhaus, you'll know that the German standard really started and refined itself under Passivhaus International. But then we saw enough momentum to recreate a US version. And so that's where the FIAS was born, and then their education/member-based sidearm, the Passivhaus Alliance, has chapters around the country to help educate and get people to meet around Passivhaus policies and progress and projects. Passivhaus, unlike its name, it should just be called Passive Building, actually can certify anything. They have a renovation program now called EnerFit, which you can check out a video on our website about a really cool project in Chicago that just went through that. Really remarkable on what they did with an old building. But Passivhaus can certify anything, commercial, residential, multifamily. It's all fair game. Passivhaus, while very small in comparison to all other green building programs, they are just growing exponentially. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of excitement. I see the excitement every day. It's a hard program, but there is a lot of excitement, and it is growing. Passivhaus certifies building product systems, and they certify a lot of windows. So again, you don't have to use the certified stuff, but it does make it a lot easier when you're vetting products if you just spec a system that's certified, a wall system or a window, because then you know it's going to meet the standard. Here's some of their pricing, highly contingent on square footage, or if you're doing commercial or multifamily, again, highly contingent on square footage. And then another interesting thing is you have to hire a Passivhaus, certified Passivhaus consultant. So typically that is the architect, but it may be the builder, or it may just be a straight-up consultant. If you want to start doing Passivhaus, I recommend you go become a consultant and learn how to do it and take that on yourself. But a consultant must be involved in the project, and certainly increases the fees significantly. Verification and QA, you do have to hire also a Passivhaus rater, who's the third-party rater. So they're not on the design team. This Passivhaus rater also is a HERS Index rater, an Energy Star rater, and a Department of Energy Zero Energy rater, which are all required, and we'll go into that in the next session. I would estimate that these raters are going to charge $1,000 to $4,000 per unit, but again, that can all significantly decrease with sampling and volume. HERS providers and quality assurance on 5% of the rater. And whether FIAS does any quality assurance on the raters on their own, that's not something that I've been able to find or track down. And from what we can tell, FIAS is not involved in any kind of political lobbying. And then again, throughout this session, we're going to reference the German standards, or I guess the international standards. And people do get pretty touchy about both programs. So if you do have any frustrations or complaints, please email them to me separately. But, we're all on the same side here, and we're all trying to make buildings better. So I think we need to look at what we have in common more than what we have different. But I'll be focusing more on the US version, but definitely there is a healthy movement of the German or international version in this country, and it is a very helpful and relevant program. So LEED. LEED is administered by the United States Green Building Council. If you don't know who USGBC is, they are a massive institution, nonprofit, that is global, one of the most recognized global names in green building. The LEED Green Associates credential is the #1 global recognized sustainability credential. So even if you're not trying to build a building, but you just want a job in sustainability, you're going to get a LEED GA. But it's the most recognized global rating system out there. They have chapters, they have members. The one thing they don't do is they don't certify products, unlike some of the other rating systems. But they accredit people, lead APs, and they certify buildings all over the world, and they create other unique products with their partner Green Building Certificate Institute. The LEED for Homes rating system applies to any type of building. Now, it used to have a cutoff of about 6 to 8 stories, but I know there's like a high-rise in Portland going up and mixed use. But you really got to gut the building to get the LEED certification. So additions and remodels and weatherizations really don't fly. Over 400,000 units, residential units, living units globally. 40% low-rise, 40% mid-rise, so that's 4 stories and above, and 20% single-family. So obviously, commercial systems, commercial multifamily, that's where LEED came from, and that's where it's got its most traction. This is a little old, but you can kind of see what states are leading the way in the LEED rating system, and then you can see what countries are leading the way. But it has become a global system even for the homes rating. You can check out this market brief per state. It's pretty cool, and you can get a sense for what's going on in each state, who's active, what level of certification there are, single family, multifamily. Get a sense for the market, and you can select that by state. LEED has 40 requirements and prerequisites, so it's kind of middle of the road. And you can see LEED has a big focus on energy efficiency, which its #1 mission is to combat climate change and reduce energy usage in buildings. And so that's where a lot of its credits and opportunities and requirements are going to be housed. And you can see LEED has, across all rating systems, commercial or even LEED for cities at this point, you have a straightforward threshold to achieve each of these levels. And here's a look at the workbook. It's an Excel checklist that you can download. We'll give you access to it in the handouts. And you go through this, fill it out, hopefully with your green rater. And at the end of the day, this is what you're going to be turning in. Your rater, who's responsible for each credit, the initials, when it was signed, and if there's anything that we need to know. But this workbook is kind of set up for you during the preliminary planning to assign tasks, assign responsibility, and then ultimately for the rater to check it off during the preliminary pre-construction and the final inspection. And this is just a quick look at the documentation. So we use box.com to document LEED projects, and you can just see this is a project that uses batch certification. So you've got your checklist, and then you've got your individual houses. And then you've got, within each individual house, you've got Energy Star documents, HERS ratings, photos, and plans. So here's your Energy Star documents. So this project uses Indoor Air Plus. Here's the HERS rating reports. LEED requires a snapshot of the building or home from each of the sides. So these are the only photos they require. And then they require plans, elevations, and then a landscape plan as well. For verification, the Green Rater completes the pre-drywall and final and landscape if necessary. Green Rater submits it to the Quality Assurance Director. The Green Rater and the QAD have a quick call QAD submits package to the GBCI lead for home reviewer, and then the QAD and the lead for homes reviewer have a call to finalize the credits, and then final certification is issued by USGBC. So it's a pretty intense process. Here's some of the fees that are involved. So if you're a member of USGBC, you get discounts. If you batch a bunch of single-family homes together, you get discounts on one checklist. You get cheaper fees for larger volume multifamily projects with more units. And then there are higher fees if you try to, appeal a credit or do an inquiry on a credit to see if you can have a new idea, or if you want to have a fast review within 10 to 12 business days, you're going to pay somewhere. That's $10,000 for multifamily, $1,000 for single family. And then, we say that lead is about $1,500 to $3,500 per unit, depending on the market. So that's all the fees combined. And that goes down with volume. It goes down with sampling. And if you're submitting a bunch of projects at once and you can put them all on one checklist, that can cut fees too. So the green rater is going to charge you, the third-party rater, the third-party energy fees modeler, who may or may not be the rater, is going to charge you. You might hire a lead AP home credentialed professional to help you. That's not required. And then all HERS raters on low-rise projects must have quality assurance done on them. And then all green raters are having at least one of their homes during pre-drywall and final inspected by a QAD from a lead provider. And that could increase up to 3. So you might be asked to have your client reopen their house back up to have reinspection to make sure the green rater, has done their due diligence. And USGBC, I know, does heavy political lobbying. It definitely has a lot of giving to the Democratic side. And so they, here's kind of where some of the issues have fallen during the 2016 round that they've, done lobbying on. All right, now the Living Building Challenge. Living Building Challenge was started by a USGBC chapter called the Cascadia Green Building Council, who apparently thought LEED Platinum was too easy, so they started this program. And so we like to call it maybe the little brother of USGBC. And so they started the International Living Future Institute out of Seattle. And they have a mission really to drive buildings to be restorative, to give back rather than take, to be more good rather than less bad, is another way you can look at it. The Living Building Challenge, I swear to you, applies to anything. There's a park being certified. There's a bandstand being certified. I think there's a boat being certified. But it is global. It is available for anything. As far as residential goes, again, it is more of a commercial rating system. So there haven't been too much in the residential world. 13 homes certified as mid-17. And there are different ways to certify. There's pedal certification, which is sort of a middle way of certifying. There's their zero energy pathway only, which we see a majority of homes go through. And then I think there's only one home that actually has a full-blown Living Building Challenge certification. And we have another one here in Ann Arbor that should be coming, Ann Arbor, Michigan, that's coming down the pipeline any minute. One of the goals behind Living Building was to be 100% performance-based when it first started, but it's quickly evolved into a heavily documentation-driven program. So we'll share this manual with you, but this manual gives every single pedal and what needs to be documented and who's responsible for it. I'll tell you that there are a lot of narratives that have to be written on many credits, There are a lot of advocacy and material supplier letters that have to be written for this program, and a lot of performance compliance that needs to be submitted. Here's an example of a Box.com submission for one of our projects for just zero energy certification, not even full-blown living building challenge. So this is what they set up for you, and then tell you what exactly you need to submit for final certification. This is one that I found very interesting. I've never heard of a single line diagram in my life, especially for a single family home. But this is something that the architect drew up of the HVAC systems for compliance to Living Building Challenge, just to show them how the systems work in the program. And then if you're doing zero energy, which is required unless you're doing pedal certification under water or materials, this is sort of the meat and bones of what you're going to be submitting. Energy in, energy out, net, 12 months, and boom. If you're negative, you're good. So that's sort of the crux of living building, is this net positive energy approach. Here are their costs, and again, that is going to depend on if you're doing zero energy certification only, pedal certification, which is water, materials, or water, materials, or energy, or full certification. And then also, if you want a preliminary audit done by an auditor, just to make sure you're on track, there are extra fees for that. And then, here's obviously they want smaller homes, so they charge you less, and then they're going to charge you more on the gross square footage of buildings. Also, your auditor, this is auditors are assigned to you. So unlike LEED or National Green Building Standard, you're not going out and hiring the auditor and contracting with them. ILFI is going to assign the auditor you, and so these prices are built in to cover that fee. But don't be fooled on those not so high fees. You're going to need a fairly robust and multifaceted, diverse team to pull this off. In one of the projects I'm involved in, I think the email had 17 individuals from different professional skill sets just for one single family home. So now scale that up to a large multi-family building. So, you might have the living building consultant. You really need your key contractors, your design, build, HVAC team, to be at a different level of thinking to do something like this, which is going to cost more time and money. You're going to need landscape. You're going to need a materials specialist or a super hyper fantastic intern who's going to vet every single material that comes through, and you'll see more about this when we dive into the program later. You're probably going to want someone who understands water. You're going to want maybe somebody to help you do some lobbying. You're going to want an industrial hygienicist to measure air quality. You're probably going to want a project manager just to manage all these people. And then some of these organizations have to be just certified organizations, which is done through the International Living Future Institute. And then you've got to recycle a majority of all your waste on the site, so you need an advanced waste management strategy and plan put into place. So, I love all this stuff. It creates a lot of jobs, a lot of good sustainability jobs, but it's certainly not cheap. And as far as we can tell, Cascadia Green Building Council and ILFI do not give any kind of financial contributions. All right, so what kind of education and training is involved? So for the most part, you as the designer builder do not have to have any kind of special training or education to deliver any of these programs. You can just dive right in and do it and learn while doing. If you're doing Passivhaus, you do have to have the certified passive house consultant on the design build team. So again, that's probably the architect or the designer. LEED has LEED APs, which we highly recommend. That's worth an extra point, but it's not required. The National Association of Home Builders has a Master Green Builder training and education program, which is recommended, but it doesn't get you any extra points. And then your NGBS verifier has to go through $150 online open book, open note training. For the DOE Zero Energy Ready program, you just have to have a trained and credentialed HERS Index rater who's also trained in Energy Star on the team. But and then as a builder, they like you to take a free online training and sign up as an Energy Star and DOE partner, but it's not a formal credential. For Green Star, we have a Green Home Associate and Green Home Professional designation. That's worth extra points on the rating system, but again, not required. Enterprise Green Communities has firms across the country apply to be technical assistance providers to provide these services, but by no means are you required to use one of them. And Enterprise has no formal training or education, and I'll say you'll probably learn by doing. Living Future Institute had a credential for a Living Future accredited professional. I think they just put it on hold, but it didn't really have any meaning. And then Green Globes is you can become a Green Globes professional if you want to, but I think you can get some extra points in the rating system, but there's no requirements there. And the Green Globes assessors, who you don't hire, have to have 10 years of experience in architecture, engineering, or building management. They have to have a licensure engineering degree or bachelor's degree, and they have to have experience on 3 projects. So that the assessor who's coming in to rate you on Green Globes is going to have way more engineering and experience background than any of the assessors, for the most part, as far as requirements go, of these other programs, interestingly enough. Documentation. So here again, we went through some of the documentation, but just based on what we see and what's required, here's kind of on this end right here, not as much, partially because you're not being as asked to do as much, and then as we go up the chain here, all the way to Living Building Challenge, obviously that's where more things have to be done, more things have to be checked off and submitted to get that certification. And this is sort of a from start to finish, how to have a successful green building project. And so each of these certifications, you will find yourself either being required or being, suggested to complete these kinds of things. So for LEED and Enterprise, you've got to have that initial design meeting and that preliminary rating. You got to submit a plan review that has to be approved before you can start building in Enterprise, Green Globes, and FIAS. Green Star actually allows you to do that optional for credits and to register your project that way, but we don't require it. So again, if you miss the plan review, forget these 3 programs. You've already went too far. And then you register the project. So typically you want to register your project to show either your client or your homeowner or your low-income housing tax credit authority or HUD or whoever you're working with that you're making progress. And then typically when you register your project, this opens you up to resources and education and online documentation. and you really want to do that right before or as the project is starting. And then you probably want to obtain a rater or provider, though you might want to do that way before the design meeting stage. But if you're really good and know what you're doing, you probably then won't be obtaining that rater or provider until you've registered the project and are ready to start building. So it just depends on what you do. Home Innovations Lab requires you have that rater on board at this point. Green Globes is going to assign you one, and then Passivhaus is going to require that, and so is DOE. Pre-drywall submission. So you need to have that pre-drywall, and so most of these programs like LEED require pre-drywall, but we don't ask that you submit it. So you can use, but the Home Innovations Lab and FIAS actually require that the pre-drywall details get submitted to them and approved before you get further along in the project. And then final testing and inspection. So that's going to be done on these programs right here, and some of these other programs require that the landscape be reviewed. So LEED, Green Star, NGBS, and Living Building require a full. You can't, like these programs here, you can actually submit your landscape plan, but it doesn't have to be installed. These programs down here require that it is installed and it has been verified by the third party. And then you have your final submittal stage, which most all programs fall into a final submittal stage. And then again, here's just a quick look on the amount of third-party quality assurance that is done. So that's quality assurance done by a verifier that you hire, and then the quality assurance that's done on them. Clearly, Passivhaus and LEED, especially LEED, are going to have some of the most intense quality assurance to ensure that the project is, is what it's supposed to be. Soft cost certification fees again. So here you can see from, we went over some of those fees, but you can see from cheapest to most expensive, to pay registration, to pay certification, to pay raters, to pay for consulting, to pay for energy modeling and design. This is kind of what we see out there in the market as far as what those fees are. Now, hard costs are really hard to track. In some instances, we can argue that if you do it right and you're doing a low-level certification, that hard costs could be cheaper than conventional. But for the most part, we see a 2% to 20% increase on the hard costs. So, if you're doing a living building challenge, it's probably a 20% increase. If you're doing LEED certification basic level, it's probably, on average a 2% bump above code for your hard costs. But this is very hard to track. And of course, with the market being the way it is right now and labor shortages and material prices, it's kind of all skewed anyway. So, but hard costs are going to go up, but of course you get a better product. You get reduced maintenance fees, reduced energy costs. What's the value if your client's kid doesn't go to the emergency room for an asthma attack? What's the value there? So you're going to ask them to pay more for a better product. All right, financing, funding, and rebate. So green QAP ratings. So if you're doing low-income affordable housing, you can see that each state has green low-income housing applications within the state. And so this organization here, Global Green, tries to rate them every year on how good their green low-income housing tax credits are. You can see just the growth of green has just been expanding in low-income housing tax credits.
Um, Here in Indiana, you have to get a low-income housing tax credit, you have to do certified or bronze. 2 points in silver are mandatory. And then they've got a few other things for low-flow toilets. And Indiana only accepts these 3 programs. In Illinois, you start out with a basic energy model as 1 point, and then you can get to the certified or bronze level with 2 points, and then it like jumps 85 miles an hour to zero energy for 3 points, which I find funny, but that's what they do. So Illinois is the first ever low-income housing tax agency to reward directly for passive house or zero energy. In Michigan, we start out with 0 points for basic green, and then 5 points for bronze or certified are all mandatory for enterprise, then 10 points for silver or certified for these 3 programs. And here's Ohio, certified or bronze required, 5 points if you jump up to the platinum or emerald, or plus 20 for green. And the reality is these are your 3 heavy hitters: LEED, home innovations, and enterprise for low-income housing tax credits. Most of the states recognize these 3. They definitely all recognize LEED and enterprise. Most of them now are just starting to recognize home innovations. If your project is trying to get funding from the Federal Home Loan Bank, which is headquartered in Indianapolis, they can score 6 points on their application for hitting the basic certification level of these 3 programs. Freddie Mac is giving $3,500 down towards energy assessments for multifamily projects, refinance projects, renovations that are achieving certification in one of these 5 programs. So they recognize Green Globes. Fannie Mae gives preferential pricing for all green loans, reducing the fixed interest rate of multifamily refinance, acquisition, or supplemental mortgage loan. So for example, as of 2016, 10 million conventional green loan would receive an interest rate of at least 33 basis points, or 0.33%, lower than a comparable non-green home. The amount of interest rate varies based on the size and credit quality of the loan and may change over time, but can be as high as 40 basis points. So your client, the developer, the borrower, must commit to installing capital improvements that target 20% or more reduction in the property's annual energy or water use, and they have to stick to it. It's ongoing, and they have to continue to maintain a 20% reduction. And then also they have to commit to one of these green certifications. And again, Green Globes and Energy Star are part of those certifications. In Cincinnati, they have a tax abatement for LEED certified projects and Living Building Challenge, all the way from 10 to 12 years. And from what we can tell, 90% of all new construction and major renovations are LEED certified now in the city of Cincinnati. So amazing work, and they do the same thing on the multifamily and commercial. They do commercial tax abatements as well. So, we suspect we'll see a lot more people doing that. Property assessed clean energy is growing across the country. This effectively allows your project team to borrow up to a 20-year return on investment in energy and water savings. So if you can manage at a good interest rate. So if they don't have cash on hand or they need to borrow money, they can use PACE to do it on large multifamily projects. And if they're in California, Florida, or Missouri, they can do it on residential projects. So PACE is expanding all over the country, and here's just a snapshot of the Midwest. Here in Michigan, we have a zero energy pilot program where our utility pays you to go through all of these stages, basically of like a green certification. Same concepts, and they pay you during bonus payouts during each phase. And they also have incentives for LEED certification for new or existing multifamily buildings. And so does DTE in Michigan. So take a look at your local utility and see, no matter where they're at, and see if they've got incentives for LEED construction. And then the Federal Savings Bank, through Green Energy Money, provides loans for mortgages to multifamily and commercial multifamily and single family. So again, your regular lender is not going to consider a green appraisal or the reduced costs of energy fees, but Green Energy Money will. So if your client has a higher mortgage or a higher payment, but they have reduced energy fees, Green Energy Money and Federal Savings Bank will consider that, and they even allow folks to borrow money for electric cars, and it's a conventional loan. And then the Fannie Mae Homestyle loan, again, is doing the same thing for Department of Energy home energy scores, which we'll talk about a little bit later, allowing about a 15% boost to your client's borrowing power on single-family renovations. All right, so that's the end. We're going to talk about prerequisites in the second session, so I hope you'll join us for the next one. Big thanks to all of our sponsors, our board of directors, our members. For those of you who need continuing ed, take the survey, check your spam. For those of you watching on demand, take the 10-question quiz and 80% passing rate. And yes, during this entire session, my voice has degraded because I just had a massive sore throat yesterday. So thanks for bearing with me as I start to sound more like a ghoul here. So the questions we've got: is it appropriate for the rating service to sell materials or equipment to the builder on projects they are auditing or helping? So for the most part, it depends on which program you're working with. But overall, no, the raters should not be selling you anything. They need to be third party. I'm new to this entire field, so I just want to clarify. HERS is a certification training that must be completed before doing any other programs covered today. Great question. We're going to get into the energy programs during session 3 and what that means. But HERS Index is a baseline to many of these programs, either required or optional. But a majority of the residential green programs that are low-rise, and even getting up to 6 stories now, use the HERS rating to get their energy pathway points. So yeah, it's a great question, and maybe I could have placed it at the beginning. Comparison charts on education and training would be useful. Yeah, I agree. Maybe during one of our other sessions, we'll have some more details on those. Hard cost sensitivity is misplaced. Life cycle costing is where it's at, although many clients are first cost sensitive. So yeah, I agree, Thomas, and that's why I kind of talked about some of those green loans. Obviously you can remove first cost out of the equation if you have a lender that's going to work with you to allow you to get that first cost higher, so that the ongoing costs are lower, and putting more money in your pocket. And when it comes to utilities, if you think about it, your clients are going to be in debt to the utility companies forever, and that debt's only going to increase. But a mortgage is something you're eventually going to pay off. So why not borrow more now and then pay off the mortgage and have a better home and have lower or no utility bills, frankly, than pay a utility company forever. Hopefully that makes sense. Well, guys, I know we went a little bit over, but I really appreciate you sticking with me here today. I don't mind answering any more questions it sure the heck is a struggle. I'm probably not going to be able to talk the rest of the day, but I will answer some more. Mm. So here's not accurate to say most lenders will not recognize the features. Many will if the appraiser makes a solid case. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the other problem we face is that the appraisals, aren't coming in because the appraisers don't understand how to compare energy and non-energy benefits um, to the conventional market. So that's why we're thankful for the appraisal institution who created a green and energy efficiency addendum for appraisers and a training and a credential. But the fact of the matter is we need more green certified homes with these kinds of programs so that the appraisers have more comps to look at. So that's one challenge. And then you've got folks like Green Energy Money and the Federal Savings Bank and other lenders out there that I know of who actually are going to bypass the appraisers or send in their own appraisers directly, or who can bump up the appraisers but take into account the energy efficiency savings. All right, great. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. Every one of you who signed up for this course are going to get an automatic invite for next week and the week after and the week after. Also, you're all going to get an invite to box.com where there's going to be a ton of handouts and materials and resources, and I'll kind of show you what where those will be. And yeah, so all of you will have access to that. So. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us, everybody. We'll see you at the next session where we'll talk directly about prerequisites. Take care.